Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Glow Up podcast. I'm joined today with who's probably going to be my co-host for the future of this series, JC the Catalyst. Now, if you don't know JC the Catalyst, he is a prominent star on TikTok making the same facial aesthetics content that we make on Coov Studio on YouTube on TikTok, and it's in a much more short form format. And basically the way he explains it to me is very apt. He explains it as being high school in facial aesthetics, and we're more of the college where you go deeper into actual nuances of the topics, whereas JC covers a lot of breadth in his topics, which is really good. JC, you want to introduce anything else?
No, I think you did it perfectly.
So basically, in this episode, what we're going to be talking about is hair loss. Now, hair loss is a very crucial topic. And the reason why I want to start this for our first episode is because there's this common myth of the just shave it, bro adage. You've heard of this, JC, right?
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
just shave it, bro. For some reason, men are convinced that by shaving their hair, they're going to be just as attractive, if not more attractive, in the state of balding. Now, what we know from facial aesthetics research, from evolutionary psychology, is that there's a theory out there called the old father hypothesis, where the reason why men bald is to differentiate themselves from young fathers versus old ones. Now, if say men didn't bald and they looked the same all the way throughout their aging, then there would be no discernible way of differentiating them from young, healthy, virile men to old, way less virile men. And in terms of sperm quality, that is a very important factor, as even as men age, their sperm quality does decrease. So balding is a negative in the sense that it indicates lower virility. Now, what I want to discuss is firstly, let's talk about how balding affects your facial aesthetic. JC, do you have any inputs on facial aesthetic here?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that I would say is obviously is aging is like one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
I I would say hair is like a very big point of individuality, and whether you're male or female, it's a little bit of an expression of youth.
Hmm.
It's expression of your inner style because you can shape it to however you want it to be, and when you shave it off, you kind of like you kind of lose that. And so I think the thing that, especially with women, that might tell men to like, oh, just it's fine to shave it off. Um, it's very hard for men to, especially a man that's balding, to come to that conclusion because it's almost like the end of an era
Yeah,
of his.
that is so apt. Yeah. What I think about that is actually with a lot of men, since it happens so incrementally, it is very difficult for men to actually realize that they're balding until it's too little, too late. And I think Derek from More Plates, More Dates said this best, that most men just don't realize until 50% of their hair is wasted away. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why, some of the reason why that happens, and I talk with people that are in the facial aesthetics, especially with hair. One of the main reasons is they ask advice from people that don't have the proper information to be giving the advice.
Very true. Very
Usually,
true.
usually when people are starting to bald, they say, "Oh," especially for men. More women would be more honest, but for men, if you ask your fellow family members, "Hey, am I balding?" and you're in a thinning stage, you're not in the full on balding stage
Yeah.
of your hair, they might say, no, I don't think so. And one of the reasons why, one, maybe the person doesn't want to hurt your feelings. Two, maybe it's a very awkward conversation. I mean, it's just might be a very awkward conversation for them to have,
Or
unless you're like
yeah,
their
or they just
friend.
don't know what's going on.
Yeah, or they don't know what's going on or don't know what to look for. I don't think
Exactly.
many people know the process of balding and how it starts with each phase. So I don't think your mother that loves you dearly goes in and starts checking all the stages of like balding. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, even with the best of intentions, people just don't know what to look for. Now, I'll share a little anecdote. a long time ago, no, actually maybe like 3, 4 years ago, I went to my local general practitioner, so that my local doctor, to ask about finasteride because I was just curious. I wasn't really planning to go on it or anything, but even then he was like, no, finasteride, even if you were balding, it's not something I'd prescribe you. And for those of you that are new to the channel and unaware of what finasteride is, it's a hormone suppressant that, sorry, not a hormone suppressant, it's an enzyme suppressant that basically reduces the reductase enzyme that converts your testosterone to dihydrogen testosterone. And that's essentially what causes balding. So you're trying to reduce the enzyme that's causing this process by still keeping your hormones levels the same. And essentially, it's the thing they use to maybe slow down hair loss, not reverse it, but slow it down. The
Yeah.
doctor was very hesitant to even discuss the topic of hair loss. Was very hesitant to even talk about finasteride because I guess the side effects were just too much for him, even though the side effects have been reported time and time again. And we made a video on this quite recently. The side effects are less than 0.01%.
Yeah. I yeah, that's the strangest thing. The thing about it is I get a lot of people asking me, will I get ED,
Mhm.
erectile dysfunction,
Yep.
from taking finasteride? I've been taking finasteride for I don't know
Yeah.
how many years.
I've been taking it for like a few years too.
Obviously, a example of, you know, an example of using me as an example is not enough evidence.
Yeah.
But you look at different like medications that you're taking on a regular basis beyond finasteride, um, there's side effects as well. And
100%. And I think it's
yeah,
just as much in your head as it is actually physiological change. The erectile dysfunction side effect rate, I think it's like less, it's definitely less than 1%. I think it's between 0.1% and 1%. And if you look at the r/Trestless forums, which is the subreddit for those of you who are unaware on getting hair related advice, it's a very good resource to have. But again, it's not medically curated. So use your own judgment, do your own due diligence. But it is very much overreported there, and it's a lot of it is an echo chamber of misinformation sometimes.
yeah. So I mean, I think the biggest thing lead you to balding, especially if you're a male, is to just start asking advice from people, from other people, and then not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's always a conversation that no one wants to talk about. Men don't want to look like they're self-conscious about their looks, even though men very much are, especially
Yep.
when you see social media and you see you take a picture and you don't get that many likes, but your friend takes a picture and then all of a sudden you see them get all the praise and whatnot. And
Yeah.
so there's a heightened awareness of looks more than ever.
What's interesting is that I saw this TikTok not too long ago. It's like we literally have to invent a term for men, for straight men who shower and clean themselves and take care of themselves, and we call them metrosexual men.
Yeah.
Even though it's just straight men who just take care of themselves, and somehow that's a bad thing. Like being concerned about your looks is not a bad thing. It's very much a pragmatic, practical thing that you will need in your life to actually have some due diligence in your looks because it will affect the way you're treated by others. And everything from workplace relations to your sentencing in court is partially influenced by looks.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, which is interesting, is like I believe in the 1970s there was like a change of, and this is something interesting for people of color. There was a change where natural, especially for African American women, went from natural afros to you have the weaves, the so
Yep.
the sew-ins, all that kind of stuff. There was a shift that happened, and I just thought that was interesting too, since we're talking on the topic of hair and like how hair culturally shifts um of like the different types of styles
Mm-hmm.
people like. Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
actually, on that topic, why don't we talk about how hair loss affects women? Because with women, we're working on a hair loss report currently at Coops, and one of the things we've noticed is that the incidence rate of women losing their hair is lower, and it's less androgenic than it is for men. Some of the most common reasons are tractional alopecia, which is basically you pulling on your hair too hard, and a lot of women like to do that really slick pullback look, which is,
Yeah.
it looks great, but sometimes it can, for long periods of time, it can really just literally pull the hair out of its roots, and that can be damaging. So you get a lot of recession near the frontal temples, and especially near the mid frontal plane. So that's a bit of an issue. But then there's also lesser androgenic reasons like increased stress from cortisol. There's also some women do experience pattern baldness the same way that men do, but again, their androgenic load is lesser. And
There's also
yeah,
COVID hair.
there's
Um,
COVID hair. What's that?
from my understanding, there are people that are after they get COVID, there was a massive amount of stress, and some people's hair fall out. I actually just got done talking to a technician yesterday, who they do hair transplants and everything,
Yeah,
and essentially, when you get COVID, not everyone. This is not a everyone kind of thing, but
yeah.
like some people's hair starts to become thin
Oh,
because of it.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, 100%. Okay. On that note then, how would the way women treat hair, so the way women treat hair
Yeah,
loss is very different to how men treat hair loss. There are a decent amount of options for men, lesser so for women. And I guess because it's a lesser incidence, then there's less focus on the area. But women, for instance, can't take finasteride to reverse their hair loss because
yeah.
finasteride is, mainly based on the prostate, which women don't have. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
PRP treatment is
PRP
an op.
treatment? Yeah.
Yes. So you take blood, your own blood, and they separate it, and they get the plasma,
Hmm.
and then they re-inject plasma back into the receding areas. And that's actually what I do. I do that on top of the finasteride.
Do you do that at a clinic?
Yes.
And how much does it cost you?
I would say somewhere between 350 per treatment, but you would need, depending on how far gone you are, you could need anywhere from three
Hmm.
to upwards of like 6 to 8 if you're really balding.
Right, right.
So
And yeah, okay,
yeah,
sorry, go on. Yep.
no, that's it.
Well, what I was going to mention then, how familiar are you with the big three? So for our audience, the big three, finasteride, minoxidil, and I guess ketoconazole shampoo, active ingredient, and derma rolling. So actually, big four, big four. But what are your thoughts on the big four?
I mean, I use minoxidil. So I think that's absolutely great. You just got to make sure for that one. Sometimes it dries out your hair. You have
Hmm.
to be careful with that one. Uh, and then what was the other one? Well, finasteride we talked about.
Finasteride, yep. There's
Um,
also ketoconazole shampoo. So Nizoro shampoo is the brand name.
yeah, I don't really I don't necessarily go out of my way recommending that one. That's not something that I
Yeah,
normally
yeah.
point people towards. I normally point people towards PRP treatment mixed
Okay.
with finasteride and minoxidil. So
Right, right. And because the reason for that is supposedly that the shampoo lowers DHT on the scalp. And as for those of you unfamiliar, DHT again is the active, not the active ingredient, but the active agent that's causing hair miniaturization. So if you reduce DHT that's free in the scalp, you're obviously reducing the rate of miniaturization, hair loss. So another thing is that your hair doesn't actually just fall out, it just gets smaller and smaller until it's not visible. So that's a common misconception. But with ketoconazole shampoo, there's that limited evidence. What about the last one, derma rolling?
yeah, for that one, I know there is research behind it, but I don't necessarily go out my way for that one either. From what I understand, for derma rolling, you have to make sure that that utensil is clean. Like, because I mean, if you don't
Definitely.
clean the derma roll, I mean, it could lead to infection, and especially people use that consider that on their face, and a lot of dermatologists actually hate it, being kind of like a at home kind of use
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
product, just
It's
because
yeah.
people aren't doing the proper necessary things that you have to do to make sure that it's that it's properly done. And then sometimes the little pins are a little bit too big,
Mhm.
and but that's more so for skin that they're conscious about. But like I just don't trust people enough to keep it clean and with the risks.
I
So
mean, so this is where we're different because I very heavily recommend derma rolling, and I guess once a week is fine for most people in moderate, like not even moderate, like maybe as a preventative to further hair loss. In my case, I take hair loss uh, seriously as a preventative. I have a perfectly fine hairline, but as I get older, I know that eventually it will start to fall. And with anything, with especially with hair loss, you don't want to start after you've lost 50%, as Derek from More Plates, More Dates was saying, as JC
yeah,
was saying, you don't want to start after you've lost half of it. So I guess some people may take my approach as extreme, but then again, I also take collagen supplements to keep my skin elasticity. I eat healthy. So if I'm doing all these other things in my life, I exercise regularly, then why not just add one extra thing to my routine? If
I
I'm moisturizing, brushing my teeth, go on.
I would say if you are, make sure you get a reputable company, because the thing about it is sometimes you go with certain companies that try to recreate the same kind of product, and they have really no idea of like how to properly do it, and then you kind of might get a subpar kind of situation where it's just like halfly formed and they don't really have the intention of like fully getting the result. Does that make sense?
Are we talking about derma rollers or?
Yeah.
Yeah, with derma rollers. Well, with
Yeah.
derma rollers, what I go with is an expensive option. It's called the Derminator pen. I think it's called the Derminator, but I don't know if it's the pen is added. But the Derminator was a suggestion by again Derek from More Plates, More Dates. And it's about $300. It is very pricey, but I figured, if I'm gonna be doing this as a routine, the $300 are spread over like 2, 3 years, however many years I wish to use it for. It's a very little cost. So that
Yeah,
thing, it's
of course,
yeah.
but I was saying as far as like letting people know as far as if they try to go for a very very cheap option,
Oh
because
yes,
some people hear like, oh, derma roller, I'm going to just get, I can't afford that one.
yeah.
Let me get the cheapest option. There are consequences with getting the cheaper option because you go with a company that probably doesn't fully understand, like that's not their specialty. That's not exactly what they do. It might be a company that you can get from Alibaba, and
100%, yeah.
yeah, and they don't really fully know like specific things that you have to have.
Especially, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
on that note, there's a couple of things that's very true, and the people listening should take this advice importantly because if you're using sizes, derma roll pens or rollers that are too big for your application. So, say you're working on scalp hair and you're using a size that's made for maybe like your feet or like your arms or something else that's much thicker. There's going to be issues if you're working on near the under eye region. And one pro tip: never ever derma roll anywhere close to your under eyelid area. That's very dangerous. But if you're
Yeah,
working
yeah.
in the under eye region, like a lot of people do, like the cheeks and stuff, then again, you have to use a lesser thickness, you have to use lesser depth. These are important factors. And another thing on that note is that with hair, derma rolling does slice through the hair occasionally.
Really?
Yeah, so you're losing some hair when you're derma rolling, not all the time, but occasionally you can imagine a pin, like a roller, sharp spike can slice through small hairs sometimes, and you're losing some hair, but you're also gaining some back. That's how again Derek explains it. That's how some other people have spoken to explain it. But the idea there with the Derminator is that they use this mechanism that goes in and out really quickly, and supposedly, as you're not rolling over the scalp, then you're getting a lesser likelihood of tearing micro tears in the skin and also slicing through hair. So that maybe it might be marketing. Personally, I just like the convenience of it. It's quite easy to clean. So again, it's an expensive option. I wouldn't recommend it if you're not serious about it, but I have the disposable income, so that's why I went with that.
Well, I know there's limited studies on it, but I want to get your opinion on laser treatments.
Laser
Uh,
treatments for hair
yes,
loss.
yes.
Okay, run me through what mechanism you're talking about. What's the mechanism of action here?
It's low level laser therapy,
Yep.
LLT.
Yep.
Um, it was considered a possible method of bringing the hair back. Um, but there's not enough. It reduces the inflammation of the follicles
Yeah.
that keeps them from regrowing. So it reduces that, and then the follicle can grow a lot better. There's limited studies on it, so
I
there's that,
have
but there
seen.
are some studies.
Yeah, no, no, I have seen some of the studies. I have also seen some of the devices that go on, like with using the red light laser or the blue light lasers on your head. And I think the efficacy of that, it's mostly unproven, and also the efficacy of that is very minimal compared to, say, derma rolling plus
Oh yeah,
minoxidil, which has
yeah.
very rigorous studies on it. So that's why if there's anything that you're, in terms of you're losing your hair, you don't want to take finasteride, which is a prescription drug for many countries, then you can just try dermarolene plus minoxidil, which is almost 50% more effective than just minoxidil by itself. And so this type of efficacy is unheard of in any of those hair loss solution that we have out there on the market right now.
Yeah, I figured I would bring up the laser therapy. I know there was limited studies to it, but I just figured that for the audience, because that's something that does go around as far as like conversations, and I figured that we should at least talk about
Definitely,
that real quick.
definitely. In my opinion, I would say avoid it. It's a bit more of a gimmick at the moment. And laser
Yeah.
therapy is beneficial for a lot of things, especially skin related ailments like hyperpigmentation. But in hair loss, it's not the same mechanism because hair, depending on your hair color, you're not really burning anything off. Hair lasers are very good at regrowing new skin. But with hair loss, the mechanism is just different. The follicles are not really skin; they're the dead skin cells.
And as far as like losing hair, I mean, what do you what are your perspectives on the reason why people lose hair other than the usual suspects, which is aging and genetics?
Well, firstly, when we talk about aging, we have to clarify that not everyone loses their hair with aging. It's not actually aging that causes hair loss. It's rather the increase of, well, firstly, have you noticed that as a lot of men lose hair on their head, they start to get a thicker, bigger beard? Have you ever noticed
Yes,
that? The hair migrates
yes,
from
of
the
course.
top to the bottom, as we say. Well, that's reason that part of that reason is due to men's prostate size is increasing as they get older. That's an inevitable. It just happens, and that's why the risk of prostate cancer goes up as you get older. There's just more cells that can mutate and cause all sorts of issues. But as that happens, the prostate is important for creating secondary sexual male characteristics, like, for instance, dark beard hair, darker eyebrow hair, deeper voice. All those characteristics come from prostate related effects. And so, as you suppress DHT production, which is very much needed, and for those of you, again, just a reminder, testosterone turns into DHT through an enzyme, 5 alpha reductase. That enzyme just breaks down the testosterone into DHT, and that it's needed. It's a natural part of our bodily processes, and that's why you don't want to assign finasteride or hair loss medication to young men because they need that to get their secondary sexual male characteristics like their beard growth. And so, as they get older, your hair starts to fall out. That's a part of the aging process as the androgenic load increases of DHT. And some men are more sensitive to DHT for their hair than others. So aging is not the necessary cause of hair loss. Rather, your genetic susceptibility to DHT in your hair is what actually causes the hair loss. Now, with women, it's slightly different. It doesn't apply to them in the same way. With women, it's more so less androgenic and I suppose more so lifestyle factors. So we have to be clear here that it's not just aging.
Of course, yeah. But I wanted to say as far as like smoking and like different lifestyle habits. I wanted to go into like the different habits that can cause.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, 100%. Okay, so with
yeah.
smoking, that it has the effect of drying out the skin. In terms of hair loss, I haven't seen a whole lot of correlational studies that link smoking to hair loss. Rather, smoking makes the skin age much, much faster by drying out the skin. And so, and also reducing collagen and elasticity. But those factors are worse for aging in terms of other facial aesthetic things like, just looking older.
I,
But hair loss, I
I
haven't
would
seen it much.
I would say there was a 2020 study
Yeah, run me through it.
that and essentially I believe it's Wiley Library that essentially 1,000 men were found, and the majority of those who smoked had some amount of hair loss, significantly more than compared to
less than half of the participants who didn't smoke.
And do
And
you know
so
if that was controlled for age or because as the men get older, they would lose it anyway?
I do not know if it was controlled for age, but I do have the title of it.
Yeah.
It's on Wiley Online Library: Implications of Cigarette Smoking on Early Onset uh, uh, genetic
Yeah.
alopecia, a cross.
Androgenetic alopecia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the conclusions was from that was that obviously smoking does increase hair loss.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because I have heard that it does, but again, it's I
Oh, a
don't know.
thousand healthy males between ages 20 to 35.
20 to 35. Yeah. Okay. Then
Yeah.
that's definitely very significant because at those ages, you wouldn't really be expected to lose hair at a significant rate. Now, it is quite important that while we're talking about young men losing hair, and I guess young women too, I want to include women also in this podcast because hair loss is not just a male-oriented thing. It can happen to both sexes. It just happens to happen to men more than women. But with women who lose their hair, it is very significant because a lot of women tie their identity to their hair. It's a, I don't know if you've noticed that, but the hair is just as much an important facial characteristic as say your nose, your eyes,
Well,
your cheeks.
well, what's funny? I saw this. This was a TikTok. They would take women that were from the 80s and the 70s and their hairstyles and how their hair was. And then they would essentially, and they were maybe around 40, women that were around their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And they showed that their hairstyle back then made them look significantly older compared to if you just put modern day hairstyles. And you can do this on the, I believe, the Face app or whatnot.
Yeah.
Someone did that with the Golden Girls, I believe, and also the Sex in the City women.
Yeah.
I forgot what it was, but they put on the old style hairstyles for the Sex in the City women, and they put on the younger, hairstyles on like the Golden Girls and whatnot
Yeah.
when they first started, and the difference it does for making you look older, younger, and it's just your hair, nothing about their face change. I
Oh,
thought that was
definitely.
a
Yeah. Yeah. Like we actually covered women's hairstyles like multiple times on the channel because it's just a very heavily requested topic. But there's so many factors like hair color. So certain colors are perceived as younger than others. There's also styles. So shorter hair, shorter permed hair especially, is perceived as much older than say straight longish hair. And I guess the reasons for that is just more so correlation that we tend to see older women with this hairstyle. So we associate being older
yes.
with this hairstyle. And a lot of women do that hairstyle because it increases their apparent density, makes the hair look thicker, as the hair naturally just does thin out for both sexes. So it's just a little cheat code to make your hair look a bit thicker.
Yes.
Okay, so let's close out this topic in terms of what men and women can do. Let's give them some practical advice. So say you're a 20-year-old young man, firstly, we'll do women after, but say you're a 20-year-old young man. So I guess that's mostly our demographics at this stage. What can they do? What should they be doing right now?
The biggest thing that I would say is if you notice thinning, that is the time to do something about it, not after.
And how do you notice thinning?
Usually, if you know that especially if you know that there's balding in your family, but even if not, you should be checking. If you're getting into an age in your 20s, you should just be aware of like your hair and you're knowing where your areas of where your natural hairline is, and if you're hyper aware of that kind of thing. I noticed the moment I started thinning because I was looking for that to happen. I was looking for that to be a possibility. So if you're a little bit more conscious about that, I think you'll see it. But the biggest thing I would absolutely say, never, 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 never ask your family or friends about advice like that. That will be the detriment of everything. I talk with so many different professionals about it. That will be the detriment of like you being, okay, I don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Apathy. Apathy
Yeah,
here is the biggest killer of hair for young men. But what I was gonna say is that there's a difference, what a lot of young men associate as hairline recession is actually just a maturing hairline. So as you go from
yeah.
a young child to a 20-year-old adult, your hair, your temples especially, will go back slightly, but not too much. But if they start going back any further than what you would expect an adult to look like, so maybe look at like your parents' old photos or something to get an idea of what you would look like, then that's when you should really start taking it seriously. And the best way I can suggest that is by taking weekly or monthly photos of your hairline. So a frontotemporal, a temporal, and maybe a back shot. And you can
In-
probably, yep.
Well, interesting enough, I saw a professional talking about Machine Gun Kelly, his hair transplant. He was given a juvenile
Oh,
hairline,
yeah, yeah.
and that's problematic long term, possibly.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna definitely look very weird because that hair came in later, and so as the hair behind the juvenile hair, well, the transplanted hair starts to recede or miniaturize more correctly, that hair is still going to stay thick and strong, and so you're going to get this really weird effect. That's actually a very good point. That's why doctors are very hesitant to give you the perfect hairline, quote unquote. They give you a natural hairline, but not the aesthetically perfect hairline, and that's because of practical reasons, which we do cover in terms of in the field of facial aesthetics, but the doctors are there to actually advise you on the technical and practical reasons for why and what is possible to be done.
Well, the biggest thing that I know that I was asking was they were telling me, and they've been talking about it for the last 10 to 15 years. I don't know how long. It's been very long. But eventually, at some point in our lifetime, I don't know if it's going to be another 10 years or another 20, hair cloning will be able to be a thing. But the technology is slow. And, every time you hear about, oh, there might be a chance for to cure balding, you know, they've just had problems with cloning
Well,
because the hair
no,
isn't.
I agree with
Yeah,
you. I know what you're talking. I know which study you're also talking about, but the issue with hair cloning doesn't actually solve the underlying mechanism of hair miniaturization. So if you clone a hair that's genetically susceptible to DHT, then you're just getting more of the same hair, and it doesn't actually solve the problem. What some companies are doing, there's a drug in development called Breezula, I think, and that's attempting to solve the problem using a different mechanism. So instead of focusing on DHT, they're using another a receptor for hair suppression, and in doing so, they're supposedly getting far better results than finasteride, minoxidil, derma. So the big four combined can get right now. So this one drug, miracle drug, apparently that can really get you some amazing results, is in development. What will happen to that? We don't really know. I wouldn't hold my breath for it. If I was a young man in my 20s and I did notice some hairline recession, and again, you would notice this hairline recession by taking frequent pictures of your hairline in a very scientific, clinical manner. So, exact same pose, same lighting, do it like a scientist.
yeah.
Then, if you do notice those things, then I would firstly consider seeing a hair professional. And I recommend this rather than trying to take actions into your own hands. Go see a hair professional. They perform a I forgot the name. I think it's called trisectomy or something. No, no, not try. But it's like they get a microscope and they zoom into your hair to
Yeah.
see the follicle miniaturization. I will get the name. I had it somewhere, but
I would be amiss if we didn't talk about briefly the man unit as an option
oh, okay, yeah.
for for men.
Yeah.
I think that is one that kind of gets overlooked, but there are incredible results that have been done with a man unit. If anyone doesn't know what a man unit is, it's you know essentially a hair unit that they place on your head. They glue it on, and some of it is waterproof, and you just have to maintain it every like 1 to 2 months.
I
And
agree with that, but a lot of
yeah,
men's concerns, and I know this is what the comments are going to be about. It's like, what would you do if a partner tries, feeling up your hair, say during intimacy or something? How would you respond to that? Because it's essentially a wig. What do you do about that?
I, I mean, honestly, you have to. I believe. I mean, you would have to just be open to be okay with that. You would have to be okay with like owning it. Because here's the thing. Like for instance, I wear contacts, and so they're not real at any point. And the fact that I just own it, but it looks good. I think the biggest thing is if it doesn't look good, that's when it becomes even more of a problem for the other person.
Yeah. Okay. I
And
agree with that. Yeah.
and but if it's to the point where I've seen manuals and you're up close and you really can't tell. And that's the thing. I believe I'm not. Don't quote me on this, but I believe Ben Affleck has a man unit, and then also I know for sure I believe Michael Jackson towards the
Oh yeah.
end. I
Yeah.
believe he was
Definitely.
balding and he had a
There
man
was a
unit on.
conspiracy theory on that. I
Yeah,
remember. Yeah.
and no one knew. So it's just like there's all these different things. It's like male celebrities are getting more work done than you think. And the thing
Definitely.
about it is,
100%.
which is amazing, is that it's just not detectable. It's at a level that is not detectable, and that means that that technology exists. That means that men can essentially, if you want to, uh, the only kind of repercussion is maintenance and making sure that
Cost.
you're
Yeah.
yeah cost, and then also the social aspect of it. Of you're going to have to own it if someone asks you if it's a man unit or whatever they want to call it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, just I think this is very general advice, but if you're doing anything, aesthetic related, some kind of aesthetic augment or something, I don't know, like say the man, or maybe if you wear a little bit of lifts in your shoes or something like that, there's all the sorts of things that men do. I think you should own it rather than trying to hide it and making a fool of yourself. I think if you explain it in a very practical way, like, yes, I have a man unit. It makes me feel confident in myself. It's a good option. If you're balding, you should probably consider the same. If you explain it in a logical way, it's hard to argue with the facts there that yes, people will treat you differently if you have hair or not. And there's
but
no
but
reason to.
when but when I say own it, I mean I'm I'm not trying to give some you know guru advice
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
just have to be confident.
yeah,
What I'm
definitely.
saying is if someone were to ask me if I have contacts and I'm cheapest cheapish and I say
Yeah,
yeah,
you
and
say
I'm
you say it's your
shameful
real hair.
about it. Yeah, and I'm shameful about like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, these aren't my real and I'm just very shameful. You're gonna get a very significant uh
definitely.
difference in the reaction than if you were to be like, yeah, and
People
just be
always love to be proven right. So if they think that your hair is fake and you say it's not, they're going to just investigate more into it. So if you're wearing a man unit, just be honest, explain how it works, and it's hard to argue with that.
yeah, and not be shameful about it because people are always looking to shame. We're in a culture
100%.
of shame right now where like, aha, I figured it out. You were hiding something. Every,
Yeah,
it just seems
100%.
like, especially for TikTok, everyone is out there to cancel someone. They tried to cancel you, man, on on TikTok, and but I think I think that's kind of like the proper way to go if you're going to consider something that is uh at that level of
Yeah,
kind of like
any
yeah.
kind of I suppose augmentation, aesthetic augmentation, just own it. While we get before we get distracted on that, let's move on to the possible options. So again, we've answered the question for a 20-year-old male. The summary of that was go to the doctor, get a detailed scalp biopsy, maybe not a scalp biopsy, but some kind of detailed scan done on your hair, like a microscopic scan, and I understand your miniaturization, your stage. They can give you hair specialists can give you very detailed advice. And if they suggest it, you can go on prescription finasteride, minoxidil, the big four. But before that, you should obviously get that consultation. So I want to emphasize that a lot of men just go straight into it without any prior advice whatsoever. You have to remember that you're going to be doing this for the next 20 to 30 years. If you're like 20 now, probably you want to keep your hair until your 50s. You're going to be doing this for 30 years. It's worth the cost to go see a professional before you start this routine. Because once
Yeah.
you start and the hair starts coming back, if you stop, it will go away. So this is you're in it for life, technically. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a worthy investment to go see a professional first before you start. And then if you want to get finasteride, there's so many companies that can get it to you without even going to a doctor. They just deliver it to your door, and they use an online prescription doctor service like Mosh. There's Pilot, Hims, so many. So there's one for like every country, and for most of this audience, it should be fine. With minoxidil, you can get Kirkland brand minoxidil, which is the Costco variant, I believe, very cheap.
Yeah.
And
It's cheaper if you get it from your doctor, by the way. If you get
minoxidil,
prescription, no, finasteride.
finasteride.
Uh,
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah,
it's like
that yes.
$75 if you were to
Oh,
get it
definitely.
from.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah,
If your doctor is, hesitant or they don't want to give it to you, most doctors will give it to you because it's really it's not that big of a deal. It really isn't that big of a deal, and most doctors will. But a lot of doctors don't actually even know about how it works. They don't know all that much about it because hair is not the scope of their primary care. Not a lot of people come to them asking about hair. Can you imagine you go to your general practitioner asking about hair loss? It's not something that's often brought up, especially by men. So they might just not know about it. And that was the case with my first doctor, the one I went to a long time ago, just to ask and get some information on it. But then the other doctors I spoke to, all very aware, and they're specialists in that. So they were more than happy to give you advice, like maybe take half a milligram or take 1 milligram if you're just starting off, you're a young man, you don't really need that much suppression. And they can give you really apt advice there. So there's a lot of good
yeah,
channels as well on YouTube. I think like the hair doc or something, the specialists from Australia that speak about.
yeah. I mean, the biggest thing that I learned about with doctors, especially on TikTok, is doctors don't know every single thing
Exactly.
under the sun. You need to go to specialists for certain subjects because what they're doing, they're probably doing. Some of the doctors probably more or less doing the same thing that we're doing, which is go to PubMed and look at studies, and if there's any studies, um, that are
No, no,
recent,
I mean 100%. No, I completely. I have a lot of doctors in my family, and the general gist of it is that they're trained to be technicians. They're trained to do a whole range of things that we can't do because we're not
yeah,
clinicians at a clinic right now. But like things like applying liquid nitrogen to freeze a wart or something, right? Things like trying to remove a cyst. Those are things that
yeah.
well beyond the scope of facial aesthetics. We can tell you how a cyst would impact your facial aesthetics, but we can't remove it for you. Those are things that they're trained in, and that there's a whole depth to what they know, but not a lot of breadth into what they know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
We
let's
moving on to women.
yes.
I
Now
believe.
let's talk
Yeah.
about the next topic. 20-year-old woman. You have some sort of hairline recession. There's a lot of women that do have a higher forehead, a larger forehead, and they associate that with hairline recession. That's it's a bit of a iffy topic because a larger forehead can make the face seem more neotenous, more juvenile looking, more baby-like, which can be a benefit. But then there's a limit to when the hairline is too far back, and I've seen a lot of cases like this where it really significantly impacts facial aesthetics. So there's a bit of a Goldilocks zone into how much your forehead proportion should be, and the women are very susceptible. They're um, very detail oriented when it comes to their hairline.
I know there was a TikTok where this one girl, she had a larger forehead naturally, and she just got forehead reduction surgery.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
that is becoming more common than I
I have
expect.
noticed that. Yes.
And so that is a surgical option. Obviously, with hairstyles, bangs um, is like a big one that females use to cover a large forehead. But what about you? What do you
Okay. With
say?
that, okay, I definitely agree. Forehead reduction surgery is actually quite a good solution. I mean, it's a bit more extreme because we're talking surgery here, but it's not a bad solution. The actual surgery itself is not that invasive. They just cut off a bit of skin and pull everything else down. And if you're not experiencing any recession, and most women don't actually experience any sort of recession, they just naturally have high hairlines. If you're one of those women, then forehead reduction surgery is far better than trying to use minoxidil to like bring your hairline down naturally. It's just not going to happen because there's no baby hairs to increase in density to begin with.
Yeah, and I would say for women, I would figure out if you are having hair, you're losing hair. Find out the reason why first, before you try to get the
That is
you
very
try
difficult. That is
so
very difficult, especially if you're not versed in, like, these concepts like attraction or alopecia. A lot of women lose hair just because of the hairstyle. My partner,
yeah.
she wears her hair bun really tight, and I always tell her that that's not good for your hair, but she does it nonetheless. And a lot of people don't know about these factors that can cause hair loss. Eventually, if you do it for long enough and you pull too hard on the hair, there's also, stress-based results. There's also physiological based results that can cause hair loss as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest damages, and with anything that we're talking about, the biggest damages that do, um, detrimental things to your facial structure and your hair, usually they're like slow cuts,
Yeah.
essentially. They're very, you do it enough, do it in a decade, you'll start to see, things that just can't be fixed with 30 days of doing this and you'll
Oh,
fix all your
definitely.
problems. No, because you've been doing it for 10 years. Think of it like a bank. If you've been doing bad habits for essentially
Exactly.
years, you already are in a negative balance and you're just trying to get back to zero now, now that you did all of these bad habits over time.
Yeah, I think weight loss is a great example of this. People think they can undo 10 years of weight loss with 30 days of dieting. It just doesn't work like that. And every other aspect of your facial aesthetic is very much just like weight loss. It's dependent on the work that you put in during your 20s. And then there's that saying, you get the face that you deserve. No, I messed it up.
Yeah,
But
I know
the
exactly what
saying, yeah, yeah, the saying,
you.
you
Yeah,
get the
yeah,
face that you deserve when you're like 60, you get the face that you born with at 20, and you get the face that you work for at 40, something like that. But
something like that.
yeah, yeah, but there's definitely a lot of truth to it. And this is why I suggest building these routines for young men and women of taking care of yourself, healthy skincare, healthy dieting, healthy eating, also with just healthy mental states, not being stressed all the time. These are very important factors for your long-term aging.
Yeah, I think that's why exercising is good to reduce your cortisol levels, and I think it's a crucial thing. I think a lot of people aren't doing it now, at least in the United States. I know people in different places, but it's just been there's so much high amounts of stress that is in the United States, with a lot of different things that happen economically, and so I just would imagine the amount of stress that's happening could just affect the body long term, that we're not going to see as much until maybe 10 years from now, because it's just getting worse and worse as
Yeah,
far as people aren't making the amount of money that they should
yeah.
compared to what it used to be back in the 90s. And so not only are you getting people that are getting paid minimum wage and they have to work more hours, that's a high amount of
Oh,
stress.
definitely. I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
And then you have social media, that social media, and you have everything that's online. You know what Netflix said the biggest thing their competitor is? They said Netflix said the biggest competitor that they have is sleep. So essentially, all of these different applications are fighting for your attention, and people will literally stay up longer.
I
I found
definitely.
myself doing it
Yeah, me
sometimes.
too. Yeah, probably last
Yeah,
night. Yeah.
and then you have to go to bed because you're working all these hours and you only have a little bit of joy of the little bit of time that you have downtime, and you don't want to go to sleep because going to sleep means you have to wake up and do it all over again because you're doing a job that you absolutely hate, and so you're getting less sleep, and that less amount of sleep damages you long term, and
Definitely, definitely.
and
Actually,
yeah.
yep. Sorry. Okay. What I was going to say is that there's actually a very significant study, and I'll try to link this in the description if I can, showing that men are going bald faster and younger than ever before within the last 100 years of research that we have. There's a significant decrease in men's virility, and that's likely associated due to microplastics in our food, and also with DHT production, which is causing hair loss. And so men are
Well,
basically aging faster than ever before.
if you're talking about things with lack of sleep, your cortisol levels are going to be naturally high. If you're getting somewhere upwards of 5 hour, if you're downwards of 5 hours of sleep in a day, to 5.5 hours, you're naturally going to be highly stressed out. Your body is, at least, and you might even feel like, oh, I don't really feel it, but your body feels it. Especially you do that for 10 years. Oh, that's your body is like taking a really
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a beating. So, and
It's
that affects your hair.
it's always
So
weird. Yeah, definitely. It's always weird to me when people flex how little they sleep and work all the time. Like that's that's not a flex. That's the opposite of a flex. I think financial freedom and just time freedom is the most important thing to me. So I recently went from working 6 days a week to 4 days a week, and that one extra day, there's 2 extra days that I get now. It's just made a world of difference. I'm so much happier. I just
yeah,
feel like I have more time to get stuff done, and I feel like I'm more productive now because I'm not spending time trying to get distracted and use every second I have to go on social media or just get some little joy out of my work. So working less has actually made me more productive.
nice.
Yeah, so that was our discussion on hair. We're going to close this one out now, and do you have any final comments to share with the audience about how they can control their hair loss and aging process?
No. I would say for women, hairstyles is like a really big thing if you don't want to get forehead reduction surgery. There should be a list of hairstyles. I don't know if you have a link.
We have
Uh,
made the video on that. Yeah. There's like bangs are usually the most common one, but you don't want to encourage every woman to get bangs because
no,
it's
no,
like
no,
a
no.
one size fits all kind of thing. It doesn't really
Yeah,
work. My suggestion here would be rather to go with the forehead reduction surgery. It might seem a bit extreme, but it will pay dividends in the long run. And the surgeons are very good nowadays. It's a very relatively minimally invasive procedure. So I think in that special niche, it might not be a bad option. Women also have the option of minoxidil, and they can use that to grow back baby hairs. But if you have a large forehead, naturally large forehead, there's nothing to grow back. There's no
yeah,
baby hairs near your eyebrows or something. So you can't
yeah.
take your hairline down to your eyebrows or as low as you want. It doesn't work like that. All right. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you again next week, where we'll be talking about the jaw sizer. Are you familiar with the jaw sizer? The jaw
Of course.
exerciser?
Yeah, very much
Those
so.
chewing toys. Oh, have I got a lot to say about those? It is very, very damaging for you. But that's for next week. Join us again as we talk about beauty discussion in these episodes of Glow Up.